Anybody hear me? Closer? Okay. Before I get into this, I got to tell you about a scam phone call I got last Friday. I can't believe this is still going on, but I get this call and the guy says, "This is your grandson. I've been in an auto accident down in Mexico."
Oh my gosh.
You know, I've heard that one before, so I'm going to play along with this guy. He said, "Well, is this Ethan?" Now I'm giving him a little bit of a bait there, you know. Now he knows the name of my grandson. He said, "Yeah, this is Ethan, Grandpa. I drove down here to Mexico, got in an accident, I need $3,000. So I said, "Ethan, for God's sake, you're 8 years old, you drove all the way to Mexico before you went in the car?" The guy hung up. So, let's back that up. There we are. A similar kind of a strange phone call entered my life in 2013. Towards the end of 2013, I got a phone call, a conversation went like this: "Is William Mall?" I said, "Yes, it is." The guy at the other end identified himself from some agency, and he said, "I need a DNA sample from you." Now, you think about that a minute, all I could think of with DNA is, am I being accused of a crime somewhere and they're going to check me out? And he said, no, he explained his agency had the mission of identifying and finding missing servicemen from all of our wars. And he needed a DNA sample from me. I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Does the name Charles L. Johnson mean anything to you?" I said, "Never heard of him." He said, "Well, he was a World War II aviator who was missing in action, and you're his next of kin." And I thought for a minute, and I said, "Gee, Charles L. Johnson." And I remember Chuck Johnson, that was a distant cousin of mine. And I remember I was back in the 4th grade, World War II. Teacher came into the class, said, "We're going to do something for the boys of the service. We're all going to write a letter and, you know, have a little pen pal thing going here." So I went home and told my mom about it. She said, "Why don't you write that? Your cousin Chuck, he's flying around in airplanes and you're nuts about airplanes. Why don't you take it up with him?" So I wrote a letter to him, and lo and behold, I'm the only one got an answer in the class. Old Chuck wrote me back, and he had enlisted in the Air Force when he was a teenager. And he was bouncing around all across the U.S. in training. He was going to be a gunner on a B-24. And so I exchanged a few letters to him. I never really had anything to do with the guy because I'd seen him at a couple family gatherings. He's a teenager, I'm a toddler. You know, we didn't mix too well. But nevertheless, he was kind enough to answer my letter and humor me. And he sent me patches, you know, the Air Force patch. I had my mom's soda on my jacket and everything, and I was a big deal in the 4th grade there. So he went to gunnery school in South Dakota, told me about gunnery and shooting 50 caliber machine guns and everything, right up my alley. I got a little note from him about once a month, and he went out to the West Coast, picked up his B-24 Liberator. He was going to be a gunner and a radio operator on the B-24 bomber. And after a while, things kind of dropped off, and my mom said, "Well, he's missing in action." I didn't know what that meant. He said, "Well, he probably not coming back right away with the rest of them." So time passed and went on. Now, I'm a guy, I can't remember where my car keys were 5 minutes ago, and this guy's projecting me back 70 years, you know, and trying to remember all this stuff. So I still don't know whether this is on the level or not, and had a little conversation with him, and he told me he was from an organization that I'd never heard of. My last assignment was a Pentagon. I thought I would have heard of this outfit, but anyway, a couple hours later, my sister called me and said, "Do you hear from this guy wanting a DNA sample? She's convinced that we're getting scammed over something. You know, this guy's going to want money or something." I said, "Yeah, let me check it out." So I did, and lo and behold, it seemed to be legitimate. I said, "Well, look, have you found Chuck? Have you found him? What do you want a DNA sample?" He said, "No," he said, "we want to keep a database. We're looking for all those guys, and if we find him, then we'll have it on file." So they wanted a sent me this little kit, you know, you swab the inside of your mouth and send it back to him in a box. I did that, and then I got to thinking, how can I be the next of kin? Because I know he had a younger brother. I know his mom and dad have probably passed away by now, but gee, that seemed kind of strange. Second cousin, I'm the next of kin. Any event, a year went by, and during that time, I started feeling a little guilty. I kind of let this guy slip out of our memory. I'm his next of kin. I got all our young nephews and nieces in high school and college and so forth, so I started with the email, letting them know they got a hero in the family that was missing in action in World War II, told them everything I knew about him, and developed a sort of a fan club among about 12 young people for him. So a year passed, nothing happened, and the more I thought about what happened back in those days, my aunt got this, you know, the normal regret to inform you your son has been missing in action. Then she got a letter about several months later from the pilot who flew the plane behind him. It said the plane was hit with anti-aircraft, went down, disintegrated, but 5 parachutes came out of that airplane. So, of course, my aunt, you know, being the mother that she was, he's going to come walking through that door someday. And she took that thought to her grave, but, of course, that never happened. Anyway, a year goes by, and there's a picture of him. Left on there is not very good, but that's all we had. That's his high school yearbook picture on the left, and on the right he's at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii on his way out to the war in the Pacific. This is the organization that this fellow was from that contacted me. Joint POWMI Accounting Command is now changed its name, but nevertheless, they said they had 89,000 missing people they're looking for, and their mission was to bring every one of them home and bring closure to the families. That's from all the wars. And that was 2013. In year 2014, I got another call. They want another DNA sample. So I said, okay. Gave him another one. Same thing with my sister. Then a month later, another one, and they said, we've identified him. We've found him, and the area that he was in was New Guinea, and you see that, in case any of you were handicapped with Harvard education, that's right north of Australia. And the Allies were moving up in 1944, moving up the island of New Guinea, and they were down at the bottom third. They liberated about the bottom third, and that's where his mama was stationed. Now, they used a B-24 in Europe with the long-range missions from England to Germany to bomb Berlin and back, 6 12-hour missions. They did a little different in the Pacific. They were more like interdiction. They hopscotched with the ground forces, and they moved up ahead of them, and they bombed troop concentrations. It was more of an interdiction than it was strategic bombing. And they flew at a low altitude. They flew at 12,000 feet. As soon as he was identified, a couple of things started into motion. First thing that happened was we were assigned a casualty assistance officer. Now keep in mind, this happens all of our wars, and they do the same thing for every war. So even though we're moved in time a lot and in emotion from the actual loss of the soldier, they play it the same way. They have a certain protocol they use, and the reason they keep things close to the vest is they don't want to get people excited or disappoint people, because they're dealing with people that were missing in Vietnam, and we were in a war in Afghanistan at the time. So the casualty assistance officer comes to the house. He made an appointment to come. He brings a book, an inch thick, and he sat down at my kitchen table with me, and he went over every page in that book, and it starts out with that initial telegram to my aunt, all the way through the history of what happened to that crew of that B-24. That's a little close-up of the island nation of New Guinea. That red arrow is where the target was for his mission that morning. They were flying at 12,000 feet. They were the lead aircraft in Flight of 7, and the number 2 engine was hit with that aircraft fire. He started a slow left turn, and the Japanese concentrated on the smoking damaged airplane, and they hit him with a lot of that aircraft. Pretty soon the aircraft disintegrated, and from the after-action report, which is also in here from the crew that was behind him, the airplane went straight down from 12,000 feet, burning, and they counted 5 parachutes that got out of that airplane. The airplane was discovered in 2011 by a bunch of New Guinea native indigenous hunters. These are guys with spears and blowguns. Same lifestyle that they've leading for hundreds of years, and they found this huge airplane in the middle of the jungle. They reported that to an American aid worker. It got up through the diplomatic channels to the Pentagon, and eventually this outfit got a hold of that news that there was an airplane out there, and that could solve a lot of their problems, that they're looking for people. So here's a more of a close-up. You see the water on the right. That little hook up there is where the airplane was hit, and he peeled off to the left, jettisoned his bombs, and crashed in that area. Total dense jungle. I'll show you a little bit more of that later. There's the B-24. He was the top turret gunner and radio operator. And as I said, the liberators were used at lower altitude and shorter missions. This is an actual photograph of his airplane. It's called the Hot Garters. It was lining up for takeoff on that last fateful day. The average age of the crew was about 22. And there were 11 men on that airplane. And the natives found the airplane. The way they identified it, they were the Jolly Roger group, which was the skull and crossbones, and you see very faintly here the symbol, the mouth of the skull, and the bones crossed down here, the 2 bones. So that's how they first identified it. And then there's the tail number they found on a piece of the wreckage. So this group, this JPAC group, then decided to go in there with their team and see if they could solve the mystery of the missing airman. Here's what the team looked like when they went into the jungle. They had explosive ordnance techs because they had 50 caliber machine gun bullets all over the place. And then they jettisoned his bombs. They had small arms and so forth. They sent in 2 medical personnel, some lab techs, archaeologists, and native guards, of course, to cut their way through the jungle. There's no roads to this thing. A life support guy and some forensic scientists. That's what we're into the jungle with. This is a view of the left wing of the airplane in a cleared area. You can see down here, they cleared the jungle. And this is all those jungle. There's a very shoreline out there. You can see the water just a little bit. And here's a view of the wreckage on the ground. When they cleared the jungle out, they went in 6 times. The next time they went in, there's a picture from the same area. How fast that jungle grows up. That's the same area that previous picture was taken. So they went in there with that kind of a team 6 times, and the archaeologists were going with a square box with a screen on the bottom. They dug down 30 inches and sifted all the sand and so forth to get relics and body parts, whatever they could find, to try to identify the crew members. Because remember, 5 bailed out. Now, when the 5 bailed out, they didn't have combat search and rescue like the outfit I commanded, the helicopters and so forth. each unit was responsible for their own search and rescue. So they sent a B-25 over there, and he spotted the 5 parachutes in the trees. They dropped some water and food, and the war's going on. 400,000 people are dying, and that was the end of it. So they never knew what happened to those guys on the ground, but we found out, and I'll tell you that in a minute. Okay, here's a fountain pen. Here's some of the things they found when they got to the site. Pair of aviator sunglasses. There's a watch. And they found some things that were engraved with the crew members' names and so forth. And for some reason, a lot of these things like wedding bands and so forth, they never returned them to the family. I never got the reason for that, but they identify all this stuff. And so they could determine who was killed in the actual, went down with the airplane. And my cousin Chuck was one of the ones that went down with the airplane. There's watches. They were in New Zealand prior to that. That's New Zealand money there that they found at the site. A survival knife. They found several 45 caliber pistols, a belt buckle. There's a compass, and this was engraved with the name of the pilot from his wife. There's an Air Force lapel insignia with a penny behind it to show you the scale. Here's one engine. You can see the propeller sticking up out of the ground. And here's the tail end of the airplane. If you look real close, there's a Navy corpsman standing right next to it. This is the tail of the airplane before they excavated around it. All these I got out of this book that he gave me. It's page after page of evidence that they gathered at the scene. There's another view of the wreckage. Here you see some areas that are squared off with pegs in the ground and tape where they archaeologists work. They would work certain areas and then declare those areas cleared. This is what they found on the remains of my cousin that they matched with the DNA, which the red marks on there were the parts of his body that they recovered that they matched our DNA with, my sister and myself. And what they did here, this is, you can't read this, but this is a forensic report where they say Carol Shockey, that's my sister's married name, matched 100%, William Mall matched 100%. They got 8 pages of this match in each of those body parts. So when you're done, you know, there's no doubt in your mind that they found him, and that's where he was. He was at the airplane. Now, as far as the 5 people that bailed out, yes, sir.
Now, you say that team went in 6 times. That was over how long a period? 2 years?
It was a period of 1 year, 1 year and a half.
Thank you.
And so the 5 people that bailed out, one was severely injured, they found out later, and he was burned. All four of the remainers were badly burned. And they contacted some native villagers. They got this all through an Australian major who was doing the war crimes investigation in 1945. And interviewed a bunch of villagers, and the villagers didn't know where these guys came from. They just knew they were American soldiers, is what they called them. So they connected with a bunch of natives, and the natives wanted to hide them out, and they said, no, we want to get to the shore because we think we can escape that way. And eventually a Japanese patrol caught up with them. And again, one of the other guys died because of his injuries right then. And the Japanese took him to the different villages, and the custom was that they would give the villagers sticks and have them beat the crew, beat the 3 guys that were left. And the natives that they interviewed, that this major interviewed, said one of the sergeants, one of the young Americans, slugged the Japanese, hit him, punched him, knocked him cold. And they shot him right on the spot. And then we're down to 2 then, I believe 2 or 3. And they took him to this village where this young girl, who was a young girl at the time, witnessed the chief of the village refused to participate in torturing the Americans. So the Japanese took the Americans out the beach, tied their hands behind their back, and executed them, buried them in a small grave. So all 5 of them did not survive. So that's what happened to the other ones, and that's all documented in here by interviews with villagers and young people that remembered what happened to them. Okay. So when they got through with going through this whole book with me, and now I'm convinced I know where he is and what's happened, the next thing they do, once he's identified, is they assign an escort officer, has to be equal or higher rank. That escort officer stays with those identified remains from the time they're identified in Hawaii, that's where they have the lab, until he's buried, wherever you have him. That's his job. He has to be of equal or higher rank. So those 2 things, the casualty officer and the escort officer. And they do this today for anybody in any of our wars, but it was kind of unusual that I was so far removed from all this. But nonetheless, the casualty officer said he was a young major from up in Northern California. He looked like a recruit poster image of a guy. I mean, what a guy he was. And he said, now you have to decide where you want him buried and what you want to do. And I said, well, he's from back east. We're both from Pittsburgh, you know. And I think we should go back there. He says, well, what about Arlington? And I was under the impression that Arlington was filled up, but it's not. I'll get to that in a minute. He said, let's do Arlington then. And he mentioned the different levels of honors, and I said, well, I want 4 honors at the top. That's what I want for him. I thought that was the least I could do. And he said, absolutely. He agreed with that. And he would get a date when we could do that. In the meantime, now I've got all these people interested in this in Boston. They're back there. Most of my relatives are back east. And that's why I wanted to do it back east, whatever I did. So I decided in Arlington. We set up the date. And going to have about 20 family members that are going to have a monster reunion. So the body comes back, the remains come back, rather. That's a Delta Airlines coming back from Hawaii, full of passengers at Washington National. And the captain says, the airplane says, I want the passengers to remain in their seats while I go down to the escort officer. We have a fallen war from World War II, and we want to get him off first. And that's what they did. And you can see the guy in the middle is the escort officer, the guy with the orange jackets, they were all the ground handlers. And if you ever been on a tarmac at an airport, it's noisy as heck, but they shut down all the power units and everything out of respect for this. The place was dead silent when they offloaded the casket into the waiting hearse there. And then onto the funeral parlor. This is what was displayed there. That's his full uniform. Again, this is the duty of the escort officer to make sure he measures every ribbon and so forth to where it is, that he has the proper decorations and the proper rank. And that's the way they displayed the uniform. And then at the chapel, where we had the service for him at Arlington, we had Chapel 1. We had a chaplain who just got back from Afghanistan, and he gave a talk. There wasn't a dry eye in the place. He knew all about Chuck and what he sacrificed, this young guy, and, you know, joined the Air Force as a teenager and sacrificed everything for his country. And then they have the awards presentation. A guy comes over from the Pentagon, an officer, awards, they read all the citations, awarded to him and presented to me as next of kin. So they gave me all his medals, which I distributed to my grandnieces and nephews and so forth. I gave those all to them, but it was an impressive ceremony. And this is the honor guard. And I've been with I've seen a lot of drill teams in my day and marching, but these guys are, you wouldn't believe the precision which they work with. Never is there a command given. Every move is choreographed. Nobody speaks, nobody moves. They all come in. You look at them, all the same height. They all look alike. But they're quite a group. And this is into the chapel for the caisson, and then the chaplain took me outside and take a look at this. They got an 80-piece marching band that's going to accompany the caisson. Now this is in the middle of March, and it was the coldest day on record, early March, I guess. It was about 18 degrees. So The burial site was 1.2 miles from the chapel. And here we are, we got the white horses. You could get white or black. They go by the luck of the draw. And we got the white horses, and two men mount them, and that's a lot of tradition to this, which I don't understand, but the caisson is back there. And you see some of the people behind it. And I was proud of these young kids. Every one of them decided to walk that distance, 1.2 miles. I rode in the van with the chaplain. I was supposed to do that. I was frozen stiff and glad to do that. But they walked all that way, 1.2 miles. And here we go through Arlington National Cemetery. Now, Arlington, a little bit of history. You know that General Bravery Lee, commander of the Confederate Army, was punished by the Northern quartermaster by appropriating his land. They took his plantation. That's where Arlington was. And in order to preclude him from ever coming back there, they started burying Union troops right from his doorstep, right on out. So that's how Arlington got its start. And it's quite a beautiful place. I took this picture out of the window. Here you see the markers. And now in the foreground you see a different type of stone. In the old days, if you were a wealthy family, you could build any kind of monument you wanted to your fallen hero. I mean, they got guys on horseback in bronze and everything else, but no longer. You're a 4-star general or you're a 1-star, you get the same marble white stone that you see throughout there. So here we are coming through the trees to the burial site. Now this was photographed by Getty Images. If you read the Orange County Register or the Wall Street Journal, Getty Images, that's an organization that takes pictures of national events or celebrities or sports figures, and they sell these to the papers and so forth. And when you pay them, they take that watermark off of there. You see that blurb that says, and then he put a blurb with it explaining what the thing is, so you don't have to waste your photographers or your journalists. You just call Getty Images and they do this thing. This is another one of their shots. And the procession going through that mountain quarter. Here we have the gravesite. This is a picture I took now. These same young men are now taking the casket up to the gravesite. And there we go at the gravesite. And the flag ceremony, we're going to take a flag, fold the flag, and they're handing me the flag. And I'm giving him my last salute. That's my sister all bundled up right next to me. And they do the gun salute when they fire the weapons, 3 volleys. The chaplain collects those brass from that and puts them in a little velvet pouches, and they distribute them to the attendees so they have a memento of there. And here you see the people playing taps, and it just resounds, echo all through the hills. They got kind of rolling hills there at Arlington. There's a shot of me, and I wanted that picture. You can see Getty's got their thing on there, so I called Getty Images in Los Angeles. I said, you know, I'm the guy in the picture, and that's my cousin. I wonder if I could have that picture. And he said, sure, $350, cashier check only. Well, I found it on the internet later without the watermark, and I got that picture at home. So I had a nephew then at the Naval Academy. He went out there in the summertime and took a picture of it, the tombstone at the headstone. This is Pittsburgh paper. We made quite a splash back there. I wasn't too interested in publicity, but the organization was just starting. This was their first big find, and they were fighting for appropriations like everybody else, so they talked me into doing a little bit of publicity for this thing. So we let the reporters from the Pittsburgh paper, they ran a 1-week serial thing on it, and then they repeated it all on Memorial Day. So there's that picture of me at the gravesite there. In Washington, D.C., we got interviewed by 3 different local TV shows. For some reason, they wouldn't let them in a hotel. They were outside the interviewer's right next to me and the photographer there. So that's the way that went. Now let's just say a few words about Arlington. Wind it up here. There are 400,000 birds there right now, 639 acres, and they got movie actors there. They got Maureen O'Hara, a great star of the 60s. They got politicians, Audie Murphy, who was the most decorated soldier in World War II, and also movie stars were there. Presidents JFK, his wife Jacqueline, and his brothers, Robert and Ted Kennedy, are buried there. In 2015, they said we got 94,000 slots and we got 22 million eligible. And the Army owns this thing, and they're going to conduct funerals for the next 150 years. So they said, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to change the rules. And that's what they did. Right now, you have to have a Medal of Honor, DSC, Silver Star, Purple Heart, or be a former POW, or die on active duty, or be a veteran on active duty receiving retirement pay. That's to be buried in ground. They have a memorial wall at the Air Guard and so forth, have lower standards for burial, but that's the way they're going to do it for the next 150 years. That's it. Thank you very much.
See if we have some questions. All right, if anybody have any questions before we call it a presentation, let's bring this over to the street. Anything? Hold on for a second.
I guess, Gerald, did they identify any of the other air crew?
Yeah, they identified every aircrew member. They found the graves, thanks to the natives of the ones that were bailed out. And they identified, that's why they held us up so long. That's why it took a year, because they wanted to do this. There were other relatives that were waiting, and they didn't want to just notify one and have the other ones wondering if theirs was involved and so forth. So they waited until they got all their cards together, and they laid it all out, and they identified every one of them, all 11.
We have one back here.
Yeah.
Were there any other relatives of your cousin who were notified that the remains were found? Were any others alive who could attend the ceremony, or were they aware of the man sacrifice?
I'm not reading
Any
it.
other relatives? Were there any other relatives? Any other Sergeant Johnson's relatives other than your sister and yourself?
No, that was all, just my sister and I. The DNA, they go on the maternal side somehow. They explained all that, and that's how they found my sister and me. I don't know how they found us or how it worked, but they made it work. They're good at what they're doing. When they, at the funeral, they came over, the head of the organization, it was an admiral at that time. It's a joint means all the services. And he said he had 6 teams working at that time. He had 2 in Europe for World War II. He had 1 in South Korea, 1 in Vietnam, doing the same type of thing, trying to bring these guys home. And they were looking for a Navy pilot they had located. They were diving in 100 feet of water off of some island in the Pacific to recover his remains. Now, it's getting pretty commonplace now, but this was the first success they had. I just read in the Register a couple of weeks ago, they brought a guy back from Pearl Harbor that they dug out from somewhere, and it's getting more routine. Once they got the DNA thing going, they figure they can get all these people.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much.